Next up, we have an exciting opportunity to hear about an effort to make more permanent the formal relationship between the nonprofit sector and the federal government. Now, this is from health to housing, retirement to racial equity. Public policy has the power to impact the lives of hundreds of millions of Americans. I don't have to tell you that. But the effectiveness of any legislation requires the knowledge and expertise of changemakers in the nonprofit sector and the communities that they serve every day. So to guide this next discussion, I'm happy to introduce Nonoko Sato, the executive director of the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. Now, as a relentless champion for racial equity and justice, Nonoko leads the largest state association in the United States. And prior to serving as the executive director of MCN, she served for 9 years as executive director of SMART, a San Francisco-based nonprofit that champions education equity by supporting students in overcoming systemic barriers on their journey to a college degree. So, welcome, Nonoko. How are you? Oh, I think you might be on mute. Let's see if we hear you now.
You would think after 18 months I would have learned how to do that already, but
listen, you're perfect 99.9% of the time. So
exactly. Thank you.
What a challenging past year and a half it's been for you.
It has, especially for the nonprofit sector, but I am so inspired by just the incredible innovation and just the tenacity of the nonprofit sector that really made everything possible. So thank you.
Well, we're so excited to have you here today. Looking forward to this discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to you right now, Nonoko Sato.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Nonoko Sato. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the executive director for the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. I'm so delighted today to introduce Congresswoman Betty McCollum. MCN is proud to represent 2,300 nonprofit organizations across the great state of Minnesota. Most of us in this joining us today understand how vital nonprofits are. Here in Minnesota, they make up 14% of the state's workforce and provide essential community services. That work is made possible by amazing human leaders, volunteers, donors, strong networks, and independence with the government sector. Governments that play a key role in supporting our sector through funding and policies, like those that grant tax exemption for charitable work, while our sector ensures government policies that provide safety nets and strong communities are centered in individuals impacted and ultimately helps to ensure prosperity for all. Congresswoman McCollum represents Minnesota's 4th district, which includes St. Paul, Minnesota's capital city, and surrounding areas. In 2010, she said, "Every community in America is strengthened by the work of nonprofit organizations," and she continues to act on that premise by supporting our sector. Congresswoman McCollum understands how critical it is for nonprofits to have a seat at the proverbial table. Besides her support for the nonprofit sector, Congresswoman McCollum is known for her work in education, protecting the environment, expanding healthcare access, fiscal responsibility, and robust international engagement. Congresswoman McCollum serves as chair of the Defense Subcommittee, vice chair of the Interior Environmental Subcommittee, and as a member of the Agriculture and Rural Development Subcommittee. As chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense, she is responsible for writing an annual defense funding bill of nearly $700 billion. Prior to Congress, Congresswoman McCollum served in the Minnesota House of Representatives, on the North St. Paul City Council, taught high school social science, and worked in retail sales and management. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Betty McCollum.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And Nonoko, thank you for the very kind introduction. And welcome to Minnesota. And I look forward to welcoming you in person. Your new role in leading the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits is important. And so I wish you much success, as I wish the entire council. I'm very pleased to be joining everyone today, and you're so many remarkable advocates for the nonprofit sector. And I'm here because, as was stated, I believe in the power of people to act with passion, to act with compassion and professionalism to change lives, to build better communities, and to strengthen our society. In other words, I believe in the power of nonprofits. I've been elected to office for nearly 30 years at state and local, at federal levels. And throughout my career, I can tell you that the nonprofit sector has always been an indispensable part of government in being a partner. You bring value to taxpayers. You deliver quality services rooted in our shared community values. And in some cases, the government relies on you, on the nonprofit sector, to step in and provide services beyond what the government can provide. Whether it's healthcare, human services, education, environmental advocacy, the arts, culture, faith-based expression, it's a nonprofit organization with their inspired staffs that they recruit, train, and retain that are helping to shape our communities. And it's because I've done a lot of international work during my time in Congress, I can say with great confidence that our nonprofit sector is also shaping the world to be a better place. 11 years ago, I introduced a bill in Congress, the first of its kind. It was called the Nonprofit Sector and Community Solutions Act. This bill was intended to alleviate the status and stature of nonprofit sector that had been left behind in the federal government and elevate it. The federal government cannot function without the work of the sector delivering essential services, and I thought it should be acknowledged and acted upon. I was so pleased that the independent sector and the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits thought so too, and they stood with me as we pushed this bill forward. But we all know that 2011 brought Republican control to the Congress, and 2017 brought us a president who shall not be named, and the efforts stagnated, not because of lack of interest, but because of the difficult political reality we were living in. Earlier this year, my office was contacted once again by the independent sector and my great Minnesota Council, and it was determined the hibernation time was over. With the Biden administration in the White House and Congress that actually cares about the nonprofit sector, the time was right to get back to work. I am pleased to let everyone know we are working on legislation right now. It's nearly completed. Thank you for all your input and work. It will be called the Nonprofit Strength and Partnership Act of 2021. It's my hope in the coming weeks we will finalize our bill, seek support from advocacy partners, launch this transformative effort to elevate and strengthen the nonprofit sector's relationship with the federal government. There are 1.8 million nonprofit organizations throughout the United States. This sector contributes $1.2 trillion to our economy. It employs 12 million people whose jobs are just as important as any private sector job. This is a powerful, impactful, indispensable sector that deserves a seat at the federal table and a seat at the White House. And that's why our bill would authorize the creation of a White House on nonprofit partnership to develop national policies to enhance the sector's ability to address national and community priorities. Next, this bill establishes something we're calling an Interagency Council on Nonprofit Partnerships to ensure that every federal department and agency is focused on the critical value nonprofits bring to the federal mission and our community's needs. For many nonprofits, volunteerism and access to national service programs are vital to extending our community's reach and achieving outcomes. Our bill directs the Corporation of National and Community Service to engage with nonprofits, to seek policy solutions, and to make direct recommendations to Congress that will enhance the service and benefit the entire sector. We all know that the role of the Small Business Administration is to support the success of small business. I want the federal government to support the success of nonprofit sector in the very same way. The sector needs to have more advocacy for a greater federal commitment to the sector. Nonprofits need access to capital, technology, human resources, contracting support, just like small businesses do. Our nation, as it continues to address the COVID pandemic, confront the challenges of climate change, economic, social, and health disparities, and the racial injustice disparities that have been brought to light, especially in the past 2 years, the federal government will have no better partner than the nonprofit sector. We need the sector to be successful if the American people are going to be successful. We must invest in strengthening the sector and engage in ongoing dialogue with you. The House of Representatives and the small business community, they do that work. Why isn't there a nonprofit sector subcommittee? And that's something that could happen with the work that we're doing. You deserve to be at the table. Now, I know the theme of this summit is racial justice and healthy societies where everyone can thrive. So let me take a few minutes to close on commenting on that subject. We live in a country of great opportunity. The brilliant, the wealthy, and the poor and the oppressed all want to come to our country and live in freedom and seek opportunity. We also live in a country of great pain, social dislocation, racial disparities, inequalities, and injustice. The murder of George Floyd that took place in Minneapolis, a few miles from where I live, in my neighboring St. Paul. That act of inhumanity, cruelty, well, it sparked a wildfire of anger, outrage, and calls for action. Black Americans, Latino Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and our BTGLQ community, and Americans with disabilities. We are all Americans, people who deserve an opportunity to succeed. People in rural communities too, and in places where the opioid crisis and COVID and economic disruption, they need opportunity as well. Urban areas in my own Twin Cities where gun violence has created fear and death, we deserve an opportunity to live in peace. So this legacy of brutality is part of our American experience. It must not be denied, it must not be glossed over, and it must not be glorified. It needs to be acknowledged, revealed, and wrestled with as part of our oppression. So we're going to do more than just remove busts of racists from the U.S. Capitol. We're going to address the pain, and we're going to address what needs to happen in order for people to heal. Just as the work that I did with the Native American community to remove the racist name from an NFL football team. Why was that so important? Because it dehumanized Native Americans. But that was not only a victory for Indian country, it was a victory for all of us who wanted to elevate human dignity. We want to make sure that every single child has access to a quality education, healthcare, a safe home, and the best way to do that is to create a foundation of opportunity and to distinguish the disparities. And that's where you come in. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to work with such a hardworking sector who really focuses on improving the lives and knows it's our collective responsibility to create more opportunity for Americans. And we also need to get the private sector engaged. And I look forward to working with you, not only with you, but the private sector, faith communities, government, every institution. We want them to open their doors to the public, and the public must see that we are ready to change and elevate human dignity, to call out injustice, and to strive to build a future of equal opportunity for all. And that's what you do every single day. And I thank you so much for your work in making a difference in the life of all of us here in the United States. Thank you.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. I just have to say I'm so excited. I wish I could just give you a hug, but considering this format, maybe the young people are doing a little snap here. So thank you. We're so super excited.
Thank you.
You know, during the past 18 months, many nonprofit workers quickly innovated to meet the increasing demands of services. For example, I sit on the board for Coalition of Asian American Leaders, which suddenly became a direct service organization trying to provide translation support and individualized support for Hmong and Karen and other underrepresented Asian Minnesotans. And yet those the most under-resourced, disproportionately affected organizations are led by and serving communities of color continue to struggle to survive. And so I really appreciate your efforts to ensure that our sector has a seat at decision-making policy tables. Congresswoman, I know that you've been fighting for our sector for your entire career, and I know it makes sense for Minnesotans that St. Paul would send a nonprofit champions to Congress, but our audience today might not understand that. was wondering if you could share a little bit about what is so special about Minnesota and our nonprofit community.
Well, the Minnesota nonprofit community, I have to say, it's 14% of our state's workforce. So people in Minnesota are touched by the work that they do every single time. And Minnesota has a long legacy and strong support of the nonprofit sector. And I have to give a shout out to the Minnesota nonprofit sector, working with the state of Minnesota and other governmental agencies in a successful census count, because we were on the list to lose a member of Congress. And because we counted everyone and found everyone to count, we didn't. So that's the kind of work that the Minnesota Council has done. They reach out, they collaborate with the private sector, they collaborate with the state, local governments, other nonprofits, and, all hands on deck to get the work done. And they bring that ethic to the table. And I think that that's why Minnesota is constantly ranked near at the top of every measure of nonprofit activity. And a lot of my bill was based on the success of Minnesota nonprofits when the independent sector reached out, because we've kind of got, the sweet sauce going, but we also know that we can learn and do more in Minnesota.
Thank you. I believe it might be Dan's turn, but is it me? I could go on.
There we go. Hey, Congressman, thank you so much. I'm Dan Cardinale. I'm president and CEO of Independent Sector, and just want to thank you for your partnership. And Nonoko, the partnership we've had for years with you and your organization, and now with your new leadership, we're just thrilled. Congresswoman, just a quick reflection. I've been in the sector most of my career, probably as long as you've been an elected official, and I've spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. And often I find that elected officials know a couple of nonprofits that are their favorites, but they don't actually understand the sector. And so we're just very lucky to have someone that has a thorough and nuanced understanding both of the community from which you come and the nonprofits that serve in your community, but also your comprehensive understanding of just how important the sector is to a healthy democracy and to a vibrant and dynamic America, where much of the social change has been driven out of civil society over the last few years. So huge thank you to you for your support and your vision in making a place at the table really becoming real for us. Last year, the Paycheck Protection Program was established at the Small Business Administration. You talked about that quite clearly. Nonprofits were eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness loans. This was a huge victory and one we fought very hard for. Yes. The program saved millions and millions of nonprofit jobs, 4.1 million by estimates from the Johnson Center. But it clearly wasn't designed for nonprofits, and we saw many, many left behind, particularly those small nonprofits, often led and serving communities of color. On the other hand, nonprofits are often seen as implementers of federal policy rather than co-creators. How do you think policies will be different in the future if we have a White House office on the nonprofit sector?
Well, first off, when the Families First Act, the CARES Act, when the first COVID bills were talking about unemployment, you're right, nonprofits weren't listed. And thanks to all the work that you do and some champions in Congress that I work with every day, we just said this is unacceptable. It has to be written in. But then it became challenging for us writing that without having all of you available in a time of COVID. So like you said, unfortunately, some got out. Our economy is continuing to recover. And so I believe that this sector needs a major infusion of resources so organizations can bring back their staff, they can hire additional employees so that they can continue to deliver all those services Americans expect for them to do. So we need to bring back both small business and your sector. And sometimes they actually work together. Your sector helps a small business. So in order for small businesses to be successful, you play a vital role in that. Congress needs to work to help, as I said, nonprofits expand, but we have an agency to do that. You don't. And so we have to make sure that we keep your seat at the table the way it is now, but expand on that. And that's why it's my hope, especially if we can get a White House office put into place right away, the entire economy will be addressed as we build back better. And it can't be ignored by Congress. And when Congress is implementing policies, you'll be at the table to say what you're going to need in order to help Congress's policies be as successful as they can for everyone in this country.
Thank you. That's great.
For MCN, our focus have been around supporting, well, actually, you know what? I should say that John Pratt would love to say hello to you. Building on his foundation, his leadership. We really believe in centering the voices of course, rural nonprofits in Minnesota, small nonprofits, and BIPOC-led organizations as well. And that's one of the key areas of focus is about addressing racial disparities and advancing racial equity. And we in particular feel a unique responsibility to this work as a place, as you mentioned, where George Floyd murder sparked an international outrage and mobilization. And so we're wondering, how do you see your legislation advancing racial equity?
Well, it's been nonprofits, especially not just those in Minnesota, but some I work with CAP agencies throughout the United States that have really worked hard to address racial inequality, whether it be healthcare, access to government programming, education, and whatever. But we still know that there's very significant disparities for people of color. And especially COVID brought it out real hard and strong in housing and in healthcare. So as I know we have work to do in Minnesota, there's work to do all across this country. So we need better coordination to do that. One of the things that I saw that the Minnesota nonprofits do after George Floyd's murder was the fight for racial justice and to not allow them not to examine what they could do even better themselves in promoting racial justice. Every sector has to work towards being more inclusive. It needs to work on being more racially diverse and a more equitable workforce. And so that representation is really important, and it will help policy boards be formed. So whether it's a sub-board or the major board or an ad hoc group, it needs to reflect the diversity of the community plus the diversity that sometimes the community doesn't even know that's out there. So our policy recommendation in the bill would really be a factor in addressing these racial disparities. And I think national service is a way in which that can be addressed too. And so my legislation calls upon AmeriCorps to play a bigger role in how we can reach out to underserved communities. There's a lot of work to do, but I believe that you folks are up for the work.
I think we are, but it's great having a partner in Congress because this is tough work and it is a long haul. Congresswoman, in addition to the structural changes that you're proposing, your legislation also does a number of things to advance the health of the nonprofit sector as a whole. Vastly improved data, streamlining grant and contract processes, clearer rules for civic engagement. But the president is a pretty busy guy these days. But we think that there are some actions that he may be able to take right now on his own. Do you have a sense of what those might be or any recommendations?
I think so. And I was with some of the president's senior COVID staff today, and they've seen just focusing on healthcare and housing and getting people back to work, these disparities. And they're working really hard to address them. And they've actually had some performance measures. So they're into it. So one thing the president could do is establish, as I mentioned, a White House office on the nonprofit sector. That's one of the things I propose with your support, your help, and your ideas in the executive order. A quarterly Bureau of Labor Statistics reporting on diversifying national service and expanding volunteerism. That's something that could be directed by the president. Some of that information is already being collected, but it's not being collected and made transparent out there so we can do more with it. But the problem, the caveat, as they like to call it, is anything that's created by the executive order can be eliminated by an executive order. And that's why we need legislation to pass it no matter what President Biden is able to achieve and accomplish with our support and our push for him to do that.
That's great. Thank you.
No, I feel like we have a time. If it's okay, I would love to ask, what is your favorite nonprofit in your district and one that you would be sure our community knows about?
Okay. I'm a mom. I love both my children. As I tell my son, you're my favorite son. And as I tell my daughter, you're my favorite daughter. So if push comes to shove, I'm still a card-carrying Girl Scout, but there's a lot more out there than what the Girl Scout organization can do by itself. So I love every single one of you, but I think the work that I learned as a Girl Scout was how to improve and make my community better. But no one does this work alone. We need each and every one of you in Minnesota and all across the country.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, I don't know if we have one final question. Do we have a little bit of time? I think we do. Yeah, just a couple of minutes. So real quick, Congresswoman, first of all, we invite you to kind of make any closing remarks. But, our job is to support you in these efforts as well. So how can we best support you to make this law into reality?
Well, we share this opportunity, and there's members of Congress that you work with frequently that I have connection with some, but we need to grow this. This needs to be a drumbeat. We just can't go into an office or send an email once. We need to work in district offices all across here. We need to work in congressional offices in Washington, D.C. We need to talk to the person who handles the environmental issues in the district office and maybe handles them in the D.C. office. They need to hear from your environmental groups in the nonprofit sector what to do. Same thing with healthcare. Same thing with people working on transit or housing or education. There are so many touchstones. You need to, now that COVID's kind of, we're doing some social distancing and doing some outreach, start inviting people out to see the vital work that you do. We're going to have to work quick. We're going to have to work fast, but that's something you folks do all the time. So this needs to be a push. One day they hear from the environmental sector. One day they hear from the healthcare sector. One day they hear from, what I'm saying, and in the local ones too. And get the letter campaign and everything going about this. I really think we could do this quickly because every member of Congress knows how important you are. They just need to be reminded of it. And quite often you're so busy doing the work, you don't blow your own horn. I know the folks in Minnesota don't do it very often, but it's not about blowing your horn. It's alerting the member of Congress about the work that's out there to be done and how they can do it with you, do it together. Because if they're successful, only if you're successful in making our communities vibrant, exciting, welcoming to everyone places with hope and opportunity, not only for those I'm 67, those as elders to be contributing, as well as for the next generation to know that they're welcomed. We can do that together. So we have a way in which you can play a role in helping to galvanize all this support. And there'll be a link provided at the end of the session. I need you all to sign up, and I need you to tell all your friends to sign up who work in the sector. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you. And blessings to all the work that you do for all of us.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Really a delight and an honor to have you join us. And Nonoko, thank you for your leadership. This would not be possible without a deep and thorough partnership with you and your team and the lauded history that MCN has had really driving this work. I think we've given our marching orders. We are to continue to partner with the Congresswoman, lock arms, and make this come into reality. And I just want to thank you again for, having a champion in Congress who not only understands her community, but the whole sector. It is just a rare gift, and we're just deeply grateful. And with that, I will turn it over to you, G.
Thank you so much, Dan. Great conversation between you and Nonoko and Representative McCollum. Nonoko, I love the fact that you tried to get her to pick her favorite nonprofit, but she passed the test. She didn't choose. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic discussion. And thank you so much for your time today. An excellent, marvelous second day of Upswell, from Angela Davis to LaTosha Brown. Such a powerful conversation this morning to Representative McCollum. Today's speakers have inspired us to see the power we each have to not just fight for systemic change, but also how to make it happen. You just heard the representative say you need to toot your own horn a little bit more, and then also make sure you get in touch with your congressional leaders and make sure you work in tandem with them as well. Wanted to mention, there has been an added yoga session at 6 p.m. Eastern today, a yoga flow. So Moon Salute, led by Cliff, who's a yogi, musician, and educator. Doesn't that sound relaxing and fascinating and centering? You can access this special session from the Spark Talks tab or via the agenda. So I just want to repeat that again. There has been an added yoga session this evening, p.m. Eastern. It's Yoga Flow, the Moon Salute, led by Cliff, who's a yogi, musician, and educator, and you can access that. This is a special session from the Spark Talks tab or via the agenda. And of course, as I mentioned yesterday, I hope you can take some time tonight to reflect on all that you've heard and learned and come prepared for an extra special day tomorrow. It just keeps getting better. Most of the content tomorrow will take us deeper into our own wellness and healing journeys. And this makes me think of the wounded warrior talk we heard about yesterday. So the content's gonna take us deeper into our own self-care, our wellness, our journeys towards healing, and ask us to connect our self-care to community care. So it's going to be a really special day. So I'm G in Chicago signing off. Thank you so much for an incredible Upswell day 2. Amazing. Thank you all and have a great evening.